The Spin-Off Podcast Network.
You're probably wondering, what is that bubbling excitement you feel, that buzz in the air? It's the anticipation emanating from Ōtautahi Christchurch for the Word Christchurch Festival 2025, which launches on August 27. It's all about joy. The joy of coming together, the joy of discovery, and the joy of storytelling, including the industrial strength joy of a live podcast from the Spin-Offs Gone by Lunchtime. It's going to be a lot of fun. Learn more and book tickets at wordchristchurch.co.nz.
Kia ora, my name is Robbie and I'm the host of a new series called Now You Know, going out all over the Spin-Off social media. Each week, we'll release 3 super short videos explaining the biggest issues of the moment. They're informative, they're entertaining, and they're over really fast. Search for the Spin-Off on TikTok, Instagram, or YouTube, and join us to be in the know with Now You Know, made with the support of New Zealand On Air.
Ben Thomas, eating bits out of his beard.
Toby's rubbing my brain. What? Oh, come on.
You get that?
Honestly, so delicious.
Tēnā koutou katoa. I'm Toby Manhire. This is Gone by Lunchtime, coming at you today on the 6th of August, 9:20 in the morning. Kia ora, Annabelle Lee-Mather.
Kia ora.
Kia ora, Ben Thomas.
Kia ora.
Kia ora te ahi bala.
Kia ora.
Public announcement at the top here. We will be making an appearance at the Word Christchurch Festival of Books and Talks and Literature and Good Times on Saturday the 30th of August. I think in the early afternoon at some point. Have a look at the website. It's going to be fun, isn't it? Last time we were there, it was a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun. We had a great time. I mean, people loved us, so.
Yeah.
What's going to happen in the next installment? Ask the fans of our long-running fantasy audiobook series, Gone by Lunchtime.
We left on a real cliffhanger last time. And we'll update you on what's happened in New Zealand politics since whenever that was. Maybe 2-3 years ago? Who knows? Nobody knows. Te Ahi will be there as well, I think. So bring your phones for selfies. Let's talk today about the issues, shall we? We might sort of come to the broader situation regarding Christopher Luxon, the economy, the National Party conference, all of that. But before then, we will address both the reforms to enrolment and all that. But first, NCEA. 3 Gen Xers here, I think it's safe to say, who were back in the day when there were
School C, Sixth Form Certificate, and UE. Bursary / bursary.
They mixed them all up. They were all a bit different. School C was just the grade you got in the mark you got in the exam.
That was like
grade.
2 days of swatting, smoking cigarettes furiously over textbooks.
Okay, all right.
School C, what was the Sixth Form Cert was entirely internally assessed, and you got a number from 1 to 9.
Hated that one.
And all of the grades were assigned based on the school cert.
That's right.
It was like bulk funded credential.
So weird,
So
when you think
your
about
school
that.
gets X number of these marks from school C, and then they're redistributed in Sixth Form.
Yeah, what's it called in the cycling? You know, where they have this race, but the race is just to determine the starting position of the actual race.
Right, like in Formula One, the qualifying.
Yeah, maybe that's what it's called. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know. Didn't get my NCEA in Formula One watching unit standard.
You can always try it in year 12.
If you want a more comprehensible explanation of these proposed reforms, I would direct you to the Spin-Off's New Explainer series, Now You Know, on all social platforms, where Robbie Nicol will explain everything to you in 60 seconds. But the overview is, you'd be hard-pressed to find anyone who really thought that NCEA was going just fine. There's a difference between it needed some improvements and it was catastrophic and needed replacing entirely. They've gone for a full overhaul. The NCEA Level 1, it's Year 11 students, goes. It's already gone in a lot of schools. My son's school.
Not in my kid's school.
No, really? Yeah.
No.
And that's replaced with a Foundational Skills Award, which is literacy and numeracy focused. And then NCEA levels 2 and 3 replaced year 12 and 13 respectively with the Certificate of Education. That's, I guess, sixth form certificate. And New Zealand Advanced Certificate of Education, which I guess is bursary. The only disappointment is they're not also going back to the proper system of third form, fourth form, fifth form, sixth form, seventh form.
Wouldn't that be great?
That would be a really kind of powerful signal.
I'd
what
love
we're doing
that.
here, you know?
Yeah.
Just when I've worked it out.
Yeah. I have to count backwards from year 13 to figure out what year my kids are at primary school.
Maybe I do a little bit too, and I'm not ashamed. Maybe they should go even further and change it back to sixth form and upper sixth. In those 2 certificate years, you have to do 5 subjects. You have to pass 4 of each of them. The grading goes back again to, A's, B's, C, D's, rather than whatever the thing they had before have now is, and out of 100 and so on and so forth. The situation, I guess, Annabelle, is that in the spectrum between loosey-goosey and people feel it's been a bit loosey-goosey, there's been, you can game the credits. It's all been redeveloped to be very responsive to the different needs of different students and situations. But then there's the other end of the spectrum as being rigid and unbending and designed for a common denominator. The challenge is not to swing back too far in the other direction, isn't it? Finding somewhere in between where you both do acknowledge that there's some people for whom full external examination with one exam at the end of the year is just not going to work, but also not making it so diffuse and lacking in kind of benchmarks that you can't really assess where people are at.
I think, the ideas behind NCEA are very good ones. Flexibility of learning, recognising a wide skill base, giving students and their families time to course correct over the duration of their studies so that, you can see from early in the year how they're tracking, where they need to focus, where they can build up their credits instead of your kids working all year at school and then flunking out at the end and you don't have time to fix it or course correct them. So I think those are really important things that we shouldn't throw away or devalue. I also think we need to be careful when we're talking about gaming the system or kids going for easy credits. That's incredibly subjective, what one person might consider easy credits may be actually very difficult for others, and that's how we do develop a broad skill base amongst our future workforce. Obviously, there were areas where there needed to be greater clarity, and I was watching Jordan Rivers on TikTok last night. He did a video about NCEA. It was quite funny. He was quoting Erica Stanford when she said that 50% of parents don't understand how NCEA works, and he said, "What does she mean, the dads?" And I think there's some truth in that, to be honest. So I think greater clarity for parents is helpful, a clearer understanding of how the system works, but we shouldn't be throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And it really concerns me when Erica Stanford is acknowledging that through this new system that they're introducing, more students will fail. I don't think that's a good thing. And I mean, ultimately, when we boil this down to its very bones, I think at the heart of our education system, aside from the teaching style or philosophy that we adopted that has seen children struggle with literacy and numeracy, the move from phonics to whole of word that we're all having to course correct now, is the fact that our teachers are underpaid. And our teachers have to do a whole lot of extra jobs and take on a whole lot of extra responsibilities to try and increase their salary, which means
I've got a solution for that.
Is it AI?
AI, it's
wonderful. But it does make it hard for teachers to be grading and managing and teaching and creating resources for the curriculum when they're so thinly spread, when they're not valued, when they're looking for other jobs because it's hard to maintain any type of dignified lifestyle on a teaching salary where you might be able to own your own home one day. So I think, you get what you pay for. If we paid our teachers better, we'd be getting a better end result in the quality of education our children receive. And I don't see anything in these proposals that addresses that fundamental issue.
No, I can't see anything expressly saying pay the teachers a lot more. Ben?
Yeah, look, I'm at a bit of a disadvantage because I don't have kids. So
Did you not get bursary?
Yes. It's all right. So first of all, there'll be nobody to provide for me in my old age. And second of all, I am not totally au fait with NCEA except through teachers that I know and parents that I know.
Most people with kids aren't au fait with it either, Ben. So you're not alone.
I think that's probably the weakest sort of criticism of NCEA, which is my parents didn't understand anything about the grades I got. They'd be like, 60, that's pretty good, and
there is, though, a little bit. I do think there is a little bit of the kind of euphemistic namings of excellence this and merit that. And you kind of, what are these words
A, B, C, D, E, and A,
come on,
bro.
I think the argument is that it's tilted too far towards, well, we make sure that kids come away with something. It's come a long way from, we want to demonstrate. The original philosophical basis was, or practical basis was, we'll give a real expression or indication to future employers, to universities, to whatever, of what these kids are able to do. Now, one little secret that they never let kids in on, of course, is that once you've finished high school, and often once you've finished university, you can't actually do shit. You're not really qualified for anything. But hopefully what you emerge with is the ability to think in a certain way or approach things in a certain way, and that will be different across different sort of domains. But I think one of the standards they gave was investigating electricity and magnetism. And that was a unit that could be interchanged. Now, you're not going to take your NCEA Level 2 investigating electricity and magnetism to Genesis Energy, and they're like, okay, we're putting you in charge of Huntley, right? They're going, this just sort of indicates that at a very basic level, you've sort of read the text and stuff. The most important thing for high school kids is, first of all, that they can read, because once you can read, you can even read about teaching yourself maths. But it is much more that, hate to use the government's words, but foundational skills are the important things. It's not actually the knowledge that you're getting at school.
Learning how to learn.
Yeah, there's that good saying about when you're young, you learn how to read, and as you get older, you read how to learn, which is why literacy is so vital.
And of course, I think there has been that ideology that has been prevalent in education that has taken that to a crazy sort of extreme, which is, well, the last thing we want to teach kids is how to do anything or anything that they could know or remember. We just want to give them a love of learning. But of course, it's iterative. You by learning things, you learn how to learn. And, and that's behind the changes to the reading syllabus and that sort of thing.
The one part of it, I think, apart from anything else, that is a very reasonable concern that's been raised is the consultation period for these far wide-ranging reforms is basically 6 weeks, September, right? That seems very short. I mean, it's interesting to hear Chris Hipkins talking yesterday about sort of showing some kind of willingness to be involved in the process, because obviously it's not ideal if you get a sort of oil and gas ban situation with education reforms. But 6 weeks, it's not a long time for something this broad, is it?
As somebody who did UE back in the day, you should be familiar with grading on the curve. For this government, it's actually not bad. That's right. So it's pretty extensive. Yeah. But I mean, what it indicates is they've decided to do it, right? The consultation is,
It's a facade.
We'd like to know what you think about it,
Yeah.
and to help us inform our announcements moving forward, but not really.
It's
the
emblematic of their whole approach, isn't it? That really, consultation or parliamentary processes has been minimised. It's basically just a facade and a box ticking exercise rather than a meaningful engagement with people.
I mean, on the other hand, you would have to say, though, that NCEA is something that's been pretty well canvassed over the years. It's not sort of something that there hasn't been sort of public debate on or public input over, 20 years or so. Like the issue of children working on farms, nobody has revisited the issue of whether new modern chimneys are safer for children than they were in the old days. And so, that's maybe something that you want to consult on. But
you could also argue that it's a reaction to the style of governance that we saw under the last Labour government, where everything took 5 million years to get underway, and by the end of their term, nothing had been done. These guys are like on a mission to get shit done quickly, and it would be nice if we could find something a little bit more in the middle of those two different styles, I think.
Speaking of processes and levels of urgency, we've had these announcements in recent times. I think they were probably about 10 days ago now, for reform to a few bits and pieces around electoral law. The one that's got the most attention and that we should probably talk about is the move broadly over time. There's a move towards greater enfranchisement. This is a slight correction in that trajectory, in that there's a removal. The proposal, which is now going through select committee, so it's had its first reading, is to remove the opportunity to enrol and vote within the voting period. So that's voting day, but also I think it's the 12 or 13 days in the lead up to it. And the rationale for that is, as articulated by Paul Goldsmith, the Minister of Justice, is that it creates a strain on the system, and that means that the counting of the votes after the election takes longer as a result of having to do all these new enrolments and reconcile them with the votes. A different accounting was given by David Seymour, the Deputy Prime Minister, who said that they're drop kicks anyway, the people who can't basically get their shit together to do it. At this point, you should probably declare a conflict, Ben, as you often do. I heard you on another broadcaster saying that you are never enrolled at the right home because you're a drop kick and a deadbeat. Is that right?
I can't remember the last time I didn't cast a special vote, because I am a man on the move. I'm busy and I'm important.
Yes.
A lot.
You are indeed special.
Yes.
You are special, and you require a special
itinerant.
vote.
I have a lot of complex thoughts and ideas floating around in my head.
Yes.
I have a lot of sophisticated things to think about, and I don't have the mental load.
Elaborate systems.
To both collect, open, and then reply to correspondence from the freaking Electoral Commission who are always on my ass. And I actually feel very personally targeted by Paul Goldsmith in the last couple of weeks. And this was even before he announced yesterday that he was proceeding with the fucking Marine and Coastal Area bill amendments. Because he also he not only introduced the Ben Thomas, restricting the franchise law, but also he also announced that people who had unpaid court fines, from traffic tickets and things, now the police have the power to either clamp or impound your car, which I need to get around. And
call me if you need a ride. Call me if you get called.
I'm not answering these letters. They look scary.
Look,
but male anxiety is real, though, eh? It is real.
Yeah. Oh, what happens when I open the letter? They tell me that I owe them $150. Like, what? Okay, I got this whole thing is a scam, right? I opened one of my overdue traffic tickets the other day, and there were And it was first of all from Christmas Eve, a magical time of the year
Wow.
when
Who's
if people
been
had
judgmental on
How long
Christmas
have they
Eve?
been sitting on your sideboard?
well, I don't know.
Okay.
It's not about that, Toby.
Okay.
God.
and it
Who
just and it
gives
said
tickets on Christmas Eve? That's terrible.
and for some reason it had the right license plate, but they just said make a vehicle and it said ambulance. It's like, who are these heartless people ticketing an ambulance on New Year's Eve, on Christmas Eve? Like, anyway, were we talking about voting or something?
Something. I can't remember.
I think I should just clarify that I think the Ben Thomas example, who's definitely being targeted by Paul Goldsmith and the government more broadly, but the Ben Thomas example, you would still be able to have a party vote counted, I think.
Yes, that's right. My electorate vote.
But your
would not be
electorate vote, and whichever, I mean, who knows which nobody knows, least of all you, which electorate you live in. But that one would not be counted. But if you are enrolling, if you're not on the roll and you're enrolling, and you enroll within that 13-day period, you can't vote. How's that?
I mean, obviously, this is terrible for Māori, Pasifika, young people, poor people, all of that. I don't think we need to go over that because we all know the reasons why. I feel annoyed with my colleagues in the media, I have to say, because I feel like after the last election, there were screeds of opinion pieces and, commentators
Paddy Gower
moaning about how long it takes to count the votes. Who cares? Democracy takes a bit of time. Do we want every voice to be heard or not? Who cares if it takes 3 or 4 weeks, as long as every voice is counted and we get a parliament that actually reflects the wants and desires of New Zealand. So I think it's a real shame that it's, I feel like the media has had a role to play in this. And, it's going to, you can't help but think that it looks like a cynical move by the government, because we do know that special voting and late enrolment, those votes tend to favour the left. So, yeah, and calling people drop kicks because they're not enrolled beforehand, is being a drop kick? Actually, don't answer that. But people who are in challenging circumstances, who might not, I don't know, it's incredibly disappointing for, and particularly for ACT, which is a party that's always talking about, democracy and this flies in the face of that. If it takes a little bit more time to get a truly reflective parliament, that's what it takes.
Yeah, it was interesting to watch David Seymour once again invoke the name of the leading patron and supporter of the Association of Consumer and Taxpayers, Kate Shepherd, as someone who would go along with the drop kick. In fact,
that's Mihingarangi's tupuna, did you know?
Is that true? I didn't know.
I didn't know that.
There is something about it, Ben, that does look and smell like a gerrymander.
Yeah, well, just going back to the ACT point, back in the old days when MMP had first started and you'd have these long drawn-out negotiations, Richard Prebble, the old ACT leader, consistently with his party's values, used to say, wasn't it nice when there was no government? Did anyone miss it?
It's literally the happiest time of the year is when we have no government.
Belgium had 500 days, and you talk to Belgians. I haven't, I'm just making this up. But they loved it. Everything was fine. 500 days.
It's so nice.
4 weeks, what's wrong with that? Go fishing. Let Winston and everyone go fishing for a bit. Breathe the fresh air. Come on.
Yeah, look, I would hesitate to say that it's a sort of, that they pounced on it as sort of, this is a way to sort of, disenfranchise some of the drop kicks. It is tied up with a few other initiatives, like using other government databases to automatically update details on the electoral roll. So the slippage shouldn't be, ideally shouldn't be too high. Although then it does raise this sort of issue, the same as the census of, well, you don't know who you're not in contact with, right? But Yeah, but they certainly don't seem to have lost any sleep. They seem to have sort of thought, okay, yeah, they don't seem too upset about the idea. It was interesting. The Attorney General's Section 7 report talking about its consistency or lack thereof with the Bill of Rights Act got a lot of attention. I think it was inevitable that report would come out. First of all, because Judith Collins QC is an extremely good lawyer and a very good Attorney General.
KC.
But did I say QC?
Yeah.
My apologies.
For the king.
My apologies to His Majesty. Yeah. But the other issue is, because this came up a few times when I was in the AG's office, you do need to be where there is probably a pretty arguable case for a breach. The government probably wants to err on the side of caution. Not saying the attorney doesn't act independently, but they probably want to front foot it in the sense that these days, because the High Court has the power to declare an inconsistency with the Bill of Rights Act, it's better to be upfront and just say, yep, look, it's a breach and we intended to breach it, rather than let it go through litigation running up, past the election and becoming a big media circus and then getting an adverse finding from the courts, at which point you have to go back and reconsider it as the government. So, look, I think a bad move all round. I don't think it's not as swinging attack on democracy as, the sorts of things that you see in the United States, but I think a bad decision.
It's a step in that direction, though. I think that's the problem, is that, when we start to minimise voter rights, it's a slippery slope, as we've seen in the US.
Yeah, at the very least, you would want bipartisan consultation on this sort of thing. You'd at least want National and Labour sort of on the same page on it.
Now, you could be forgiven for not noticing it, but the National Party had its conference over the weekend in Christchurch. It was a very sort of surgical operation. They kind of were pretty in and out, didn't mess around a lot, didn't seem to want to necessarily attract huge amounts of attention. No sign of Christopher Luxon on Q&A, which in a written constitution should be a requirement for leaders of parties to appear on Q&A on the weekends of their conferences. But you can hardly blame them because, when everyone is busy with their shoulders trying to push the wagon back on the track, you haven't got time for balloons and muffins and all that sort of thing.
When the vibes aren't vibing.
The vibes are not vibing, especially. There was the headlines in the sort of day or two leading up to it and on the day were pretty, they didn't exactly set a magnificent agenda for the chats and the tea rooms and the hostelries around Christchurch. There was Andrea Vance had a column headline Black Friday, which referred to the Trump tariffs, which came in on the Friday, which is really unhelpful to the National Party, going up to 15%. Although I kind of
pretty
think
unhelpful for an FBI head office country.
That wasn't, yeah, that's right, guys. But I think some of the chat around that, really, is there anything we can do? Probably not. Short
maybe
of,
not piss off our other trading partner by having an FBI office and siding against them.
I thought, what could we do for Donald Trump? Rename Cook Strait the Donald Trump has a giant schlong strait, or something like that.
The Gulf of Trump.
The Gulf, something like that. There was Luxon fighting from a corner, was the column by one Ben Thomas. There was Thomas Coughlin was talking about Luxon flying to Christchurch bruised and diminished, and then Matthew Hooton, reliable always to top the pack in terms of entertainment, said Luxon is living on borrowed. I mean, just generally, Luxon was getting booed at the netball. Yes. That hotbed of radical activism and butter terrorists.
Those netball mums, watch out for them.
There was we haven't talked about all the butter stuff. We missed out. We were poorly timed. I'm sure all the listeners are disappointed. We haven't had good butter chat, but that became the kind of microcosm for the state of cost of living. And Nicola Willis hauled what's his name, Miles Hurrell from Fonterra into office recalcitrant ambassador from a rogue state, to explain.
That was so weird, eh? She talked up such a big game beforehand, she was going to slap him up. And then afterwards she was like, the total opposite. It was
Delicious,
crazy.
Delicious. He brought in a delicious slice of toast.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Nothing like you
It's
can't
what
fix
done
that.
it. Man, he tried to
I
outrun
demanded
Mikey
answers.
Shermanate. Absolutely not. Do not try and outrun the Shermanator. You do not have a chance against that girl.
What else? I mean, there was that slightly weird sort of 12-minute doth protest too much, like absolutely stimulating the market with cost of living rhetoric at that post-cab press conference, just absolutely pumping the rhetoric economy full of blood. There's also any minute now. What time is it now? It's like 9:45. Later this morning, there will be the unemployment numbers, which are by most predictions going to be the highest since 2016, I think. The obvious answer to that is to sack the chief statistician. if Christopher Luxon has a backbone. Just a lot of stuff around.
There was my trip to Brisbane. They're lucky that didn't happen before the conference because I collected so much anecdata.
Did you?
Yes.
From
Would you like to
New
hear
Zealanders?
some of it?
Yes, please.
No, just from my eyeballs.
Oh, I see.
And my listening.
I see.
So here's my anecdata. In Brisbane, early on a Saturday, early on a Sunday, late on a Friday, all day Friday, the city is absolutely chock-a-block.
Right.
There are workers lined up outside of restaurants at lunchtime waiting to get in. I saw like maybe 2 homeless people the whole time I was there. It is so vibrant and busy and vital when you compare it to downtown Queen Street. I have to say it was a pretty stark reminder of how far we have drifted over the last few years. And when people talk about, Auckland being a world-class city, you can really see the gap now between us. Because I've always sort of thought of Brisbane as like the ugly stepsister of Melbourne and Sydney, but it was amazing there.
Sydney felt like that last time I was there. Which was
and
more
really
than 10 years ago.
interesting to see how they have recovered from COVID in terms of, people in the city busy working as opposed to us.
I've started to work on, like, every conversation about the shortcomings of Auckland now goes back to when the CRL opens.
Yeah.
Everything will be good. Everything will be good. CRL and IKEA. I mean, those are the main things, right? Like those two things. You can get to IKEA and Sylvia Park on the CRL. Everything will be fine.
I mean, when you have companies like Smith & Co. closing their doors, this stuff does not bode well for the government. It doesn't bode well for National. It really doesn't, because, it's one thing for poor people to be struggling. That's the status quo. But for prestigious companies like that with such a long and storied history to have to close their doors really speaks to how dire things are, I think. And from what I see, like National's traditional supporter base aren't very happy with them.
You wrote then in your column on Saturday that, National has stapled itself so much to the mast of growth. So the economy is kind of priorities number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I guess the question in a way is things aren't going to be great in a hurry, but it's not necessary that things need to be great, but they need to be getting better. And once you feel like you're going in a better direction, which is why people apply so much focus on that metric, then it's like that's the key thing in the way we feel and the way we feel about our leaders, yeah?
And it's a slow grind, right? Because, that extra money from interest rate drops is coming through. I think Brad Olson forecast it would be about sort of $42 million extra in back pockets by the end of this year as a result of people fixing at lower rates. That's a lot of extra money in the economy, but people aren't sort of spending it as much, even though it's kind of flowing through now. And that's because unemployment's rising. People are a little, worried about the future. And so it does, it's iterative in both ways. People worry and so they stop spending. So the economy, stalls. On the other hand, as people sort of start becoming a little more comfortable, they think, well, I'm still in my job. We are picking up a bit more work. We're they start to spend, they might push out the boat a little on their spending, but it is slow. There isn't this kind of spike like we saw. The sad truth of the matter is, I think, and Bernard Hickey would talk about this as well, that most of our economic booms in New Zealand are driven by our growth has been in the past driven by immigration, bringing in more bodies, which doesn't sort of really help per capita GDP. It does help GDP in general, which can be good, but not per capita. You don't feel your living standard rising. The second thing is, otherwise, immigrants can unlock sort of, the skills that we need for other things that will improve the economy. But the other thing is the house prices. When house prices spike because of low interest rates, people have this wealth effect. They feel, I'm going to get out some of that gain on my house on my credit card, which is like an ATM card, and I'll buy a boat, I'll buy, whatever. And that's not happening now. And look, I think it's to the government's credit that Chris Bishop is, certainly to their credit, that they are trying to solve this issue and trying to get more housing built. They're trying, Chris Bishop is the only senior government politician I think I've ever heard who says that he wants house prices to come down. And I think they deserve a lot of credit for that. But in the short term, it really doesn't help, because that is usually the hit that kind of jumpstarts the New Zealand economy, which is, unrealized gains on wildly overpriced housing. And it's tough. There's no easy answer. The government has, they're trying to bring forward as many of those sort of capital expenditure projects as they can. That re-announcement of $6 billion of projects. I think I understand that other ministers are sort of trying to push RFPs out the door and really kind of get things moving that way. But, there's no easy answer. And so they're really struggling here. Because, people do want to see results.
My concern is the quality of housing stock that we'll end up with, because while they're deregulating all of these materials that we could, there's no doubt materials for building need to be much cheaper than what they are. It's ridiculous. At the same time, part of the reason we're in a housing crisis is because of the whole leaky building saga that happened last time we deregulated building materials and building standards and all of that. So my concern is that we're going to get a whole lot of flat pack IKEA housing that again puts us right back in the same position as before. Built on townhouses on Mount Eden, I think, if Chris is left to it.
The last piece of it, which maybe we can finish on, is a personnel one. Now, one of the points that Hooton made in his column was that even if the existing coalition is returned with National diminished as the leading party within it, you could have a situation where list-only MPs such as Paul Goldsmith, your bête noire, Ben, would miss out. And so the pressure does start to grow. And one of the questions is, it's not easy to lead a party when you're trying to get through that tough bit of kind of, long grass before things start to pick up. But John Key wasn't always humming in the economy, and the numbers stayed pretty high the whole time. We saw immediately the conference was done and dusted. The very next morning, Luxon was standing beside Erica Stanford, who's performed really impressively. Instead of Christopher Luxon on Q&A was Chris Bishop, who did a pretty impressive job, I thought, defending the National Party's record. Simeon Brown is fronting on health with confidence and a fairly assured style. And then you've got Nicola Willis, who this morning was interesting I don't know if you heard on Morning Report on RNZ. There's a new, really interesting, impressive new slot they've got, which is the two deputies of the main parties are there. So it was Nicola Willis and Carmel Sepuloni. And Nicola Willis is impressive. It's interesting because that's not a thing that governments have tended to do for a long time. Certainly not on portfolios. Deputy is not a portfolio in that same sense. But it's a thing that governments have generally tried to avoid, apart from a sort of an MP versus MP sort of thing. And it's, and I thought to myself, listening to Nicola Willis doing a pretty good job, up against Carmel Sepuloni. Could Christopher Luxon do that? I'm not sure he could.
Look, I think that John Key comparison is an interesting one, and like it wasn't all roses and chocolates, or what is it? What do you have? Roses, chocolates, things that smell nice during Key's tenure. But the difference is that Key looked like the captain of his waka at all times. He was the one that was calling the shots. He was the rangatira, and that is something that New Zealanders absolutely do not see in Luxon. He looks like he's getting rings run round him by two minor parties who have a very small fraction of support. What was it? 8% for ACT, and I can't remember how much. These guys weren't like double-digit
But a lot more experience.
percentages, but they're far slicker, smarter, experienced politicians than him, and it shows. And I would be very surprised if Luxon is still leading the National Party by the time we get to the next election.
Huh, interesting. Ben?
Well, I don't think his leadership's imminently under threat. I think if they sort of were dipping around 30 or below, then you'd probably start to see action, I think. But there's some time to go before then. He certainly does. He's got a structural problem that no previous MMP Prime Minister has had, which is those two twin flames next to him. Really undermining his leadership. Not fatally, but just sort of. But they do undermine that era of authority. This is important, right? Because the credibility thing does come into it. John Key, the great reassurer, would say, look, better times are coming. Let me explain this. Whereas Christopher Luxon sort of says it, and because he doesn't have that sort of same personal attachment with the electorate, the patience has run out essentially, and people are no longer taking his word that better times are ahead. And that's a really difficult position to be in. There's no guarantee that John Key could have managed. I mean, probably could have managed the situation a bit better, but there's no guarantee that John Key would be John Key if he was in coalition with David Seymour and Winston Peters. In fact, one of the reasons John Key gave for stepping aside was the potential return of Winston Peters and National's reliance on it. And he said,
whom he'd ruled out.
Yeah.
Okay, look, we got to run. Thanks for your company. Lots of love. Kia ora.
The Spin-off Podcast Network.